I thought I knew what betrayal felt like when my grandparents left everything to my cousin and gave me nothing. I stood at their funeral, holding back tears, wondering what I had done wrong. For 3 years, I carried that pain, believing I wasn't good enough, wasn't loved enough. But then a lawyer called. He said there was a letter my grandmother had hidden, with instructions that it should only be given to me after a specific amount of time had passed. When I opened it, my hands were shaking. And when I read the words inside, everything I thought I knew about my family, about love, about worth, it all shattered and rebuilt itself in a single moment. This is the story of how I was disinherited, how I survived the heartbreak, and how a hidden letter revealed a truth so beautiful and so painful that it changed my life forever. My name is Emma, and I grew up believing I was special, not because I was spoiled or given everything I wanted, but because my grandparents made me feel that way. They lived in a small house at the edge of town, with a garden full of roses and a porch swing that creaked when you sat on it. Every Sunday, my parents would drop me off there, and I would spend the whole day with Grandma Rose and Grandpa Henry. Grandma would bake cookies, and the smell would fill the entire house. Grandpa would teach me how to play chess, even though I was terrible at it. He never got frustrated. He would just smile and say, "You'll get it, Emma, you just need to think a few steps ahead." I loved them more than I could put into words. They weren't just my grandparents, they were my safe place. When I was 10, my parents went through a difficult divorce. There were fights, tears, and long silences that made the house feel cold. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough to know that things were broken. During that time, my grandparents became even more important to me. I would spend entire weekends at their house, sleeping in the guest room that smelled like lavender and old books. Grandma would sit on the edge of my bed at night and tell me stories about when she was young, about the adventures she had, the mistakes she made, and the lessons she learned. She would stroke my hair and say, "Emma, you are stronger than you think. Life will test you, but you will always find your way." I believed her. I believed that no matter what happened, I would be okay because I had them. My cousin Daniel was different. He was 2 years older than me, and he lived in the city with his parents, my uncle's family. They had money. They drove expensive cars and took vacations to places I had only seen in pictures. Daniel would visit our grandparents too, but not as often as I did. When he did come, he was polite and charming. Grandma would fuss over him, and Grandpa would ask him about school and his plans for the future. I never felt jealous. I just thought we were both loved in different ways. As I grew older, I started helping my grandparents more. I would mow the lawn, help Grandma with her garden, drive them to doctor's appointments. When I turned 16, I got my driver's license and I became their unofficial chauffeur. I didn't mind. I loved spending time with them. I loved listening to their stories, their laughter, their gentle advice. When I graduated high school, Grandpa pulled me aside. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Emma, I'm proud of you. You've grown into a wonderful young woman. Your grandmother and we see how hard you work, how kind you are. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small." I hugged him tight. I felt so loved, so secure. I went to community college because I couldn't afford a university. I studied business and worked part-time at a bookstore to pay for my classes. It wasn't glamorous, but I was happy. I still visited my grandparents every weekend. I would bring them groceries, fix things around the house, and sit with them on the porch swing, watching the sunset. Daniel, meanwhile, went to a prestigious university. He studied law. He was doing well, everyone said. He was going to be successful. I was happy for him. I didn't compare myself to him. I thought there was enough love to go around. But then, when I was 21, everything changed. Grandpa Henry had a heart attack. It was sudden. He was in the garden one moment, and the next, he was on the ground. Grandma called me, her voice shaking, and I drove there as fast as I could. But by the time I arrived, he was gone. The funeral was small. Family and a few close friends. I stood next to Grandma, holding her hand, feeling like a part of my heart had been ripped out. Daniel was there too. He looked sad, but he didn't cry. After the funeral, Grandma seemed to shrink. She became quieter, more fragile. I visited her even more often, sometimes staying overnight to make sure she wasn't alone. She would hold my hand and say, "You're a good girl, Emma. Your grandfather loved you so much." I would cry then because I missed him and because I didn't know how to fill the emptiness he left behind. 2 years later, Grandma Rose passed away in her sleep. It was peaceful, the doctor said. But it didn't feel peaceful to me. It felt like I had lost the last person who truly understood me. At her funeral, I cried until I had no tears left. And then, a week later, the lawyer called. He asked me to come to his office for the reading of the will. I went, assuming it was just a formality. I didn't care about money or property. I just wanted to feel close to them one last time. But when the lawyer read the will, my world fell apart. Everything, the house, the savings, the small investments, had been left to Daniel. I got nothing. Not the house. Not a piece of jewelry. Not even a letter, just nothing. I sat there, frozen, unable to process what I was hearing. Daniel looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. The lawyer explained that this was my grandmother's final wish and that it was legally binding. I walked out of that office in a daze. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt empty. I couldn't understand it. Why would they do this? What had I done wrong? The days after the will reading were some of the darkest of my life. I kept replaying every memory, every conversation, searching for clues. Had I missed something? Had I done something to upset them? I thought about all the weekends I spent with them, all the times I helped them, all the moments we shared, and I couldn't find a single reason why they would choose to leave me out. I called my mother, my voice shaking. I told her what had happened. There was a long silence on the other end. Then she said, "Emma, I'm so sorry, I don't understand it either. Your grandparents loved you, I know they did, but love isn't supposed to feel like this. Love isn't supposed to leave you questioning your worth." I tried to convince myself that it was just money, that material things didn't matter, but it wasn't about the money. It was about what it represented. It was about being seen, being valued, being remembered, and I had been erased. I stopped visiting the places we used to go together. I couldn't drive past their house without feeling a sharp pain in my chest. I threw myself into work and school, trying to distract myself, but at night when I was alone, the questions would come back. Why wasn't I enough? Daniel moved into the house. He renovated it, updated it, and eventually put it up for rent. I heard about it through family gossip. It felt like a betrayal on top of a betrayal. That house was supposed to be a home, a memory, a sacred place. And now it was just another property. I saw Daniel once, about 6 months after the will reading. It was at a family gathering. He approached me, looking uncomfortable. He said, "Emma, I just want you to know I didn't ask for this. I don't know why they made that decision." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He continued, "If you ever need anything, just let me know." But I didn't need his pity. I didn't need his guilt. I just needed to understand. I started to pull away from the family. I stopped going to gatherings. I stopped answering calls. I built walls around my heart because I didn't want to be hurt again. My friends noticed the change in me. I was quieter, more distant. One of them, Sarah, finally confronted me. She said, "Emma, you're not yourself. What's going on?" I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she hugged me. She said, "You are not defined by what they left you. You are defined by who you are." Her words helped a little, but the wound was still there, deep and raw. I graduated from community college and got a job at a small marketing firm. It wasn't my dream job, but it was stable. I rented a tiny apartment and tried to build a life for myself. I went to therapy. I talked about my grandparents, about the will, about the feelings of abandonment. My therapist was kind. She said, "Sometimes people make decisions that don't make sense to us. And sometimes we have to accept that we may never fully understand why." But I didn't want to accept it. I wanted answers. 3 years passed. 3 years of slowly learning to live with the pain. I stopped asking why. I stopped expecting closure. I focused on my work, my friendships, the small joys that life offered. I wasn't happy, but I wasn't broken anymore. I was surviving. And then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. The voice on the other end said, "Is this Emma Carter?" I said yes. He introduced himself as Mr. Whitman, the lawyer who had read my grandmother's will 3 years ago. My heart started to race. He said, "I have something for you. Your grandmother left specific instructions that I was to give you a letter, but only after 3 years had passed since her death. I'd like you to come to my office as soon as possible." I could barely breathe. A letter after 3 years. I agreed to meet him the next day. That night I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about what the letter might say. Was it an apology, an explanation, a final goodbye? The next morning I drove to his office, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Mr. Whitman greeted me with a kind smile and handed me an envelope. It was sealed, with my name written in Grandma's handwriting. Just seeing her writing made my eyes sting with tears. He said, "Take your time. You can read it here or take it home, whatever you prefer." I chose to stay. I needed to know, right then. I opened the envelope with trembling hands and began to read. The letter was written on pale blue paper, the kind Grandma used to write her grocery lists. Her handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. I could almost hear her voice as I read the words. "My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, then 3 years have passed since I left this world. I know those 3 years have been filled with pain, confusion, and questions. I know you have wondered why we left everything to Daniel and nothing to you. I know you have felt abandoned, unloved, and perhaps even betrayed. And for that, my sweet girl, I am so deeply sorry. But I need you to understand something. Everything we did because we love you. Let me explain. When your grandfather and I made our will, we knew we had a choice to make. We had 2 grandchildren we loved dearly, but we also understood that you and Daniel were on very different paths. Daniel came from privilege. His parents gave him every opportunity, every advantage. He went to the best schools, had connections, and a safety net that would catch him no matter what. We were proud of him, but we also knew that he would be fine without our help. You, on the other hand, were different. You were strong, independent, and determined to make your own way. You worked hard for everything you had. You didn't ask for handouts. You didn't expect things to be handed to you. And we admired that more than you could ever know. But we also worried about you. We worried that if we left you money, you might become dependent on it. We worried that it might change you, make you less hungry, less driven. We wanted you to build your own life, to discover your own strength without the crutch of inheritance. So we made a difficult decision. We left everything to Daniel, knowing it would hurt you, knowing you would feel abandoned. But we did it because we believed in you. We believed that you didn't need our money to succeed. We believed that you would rise above the pain and become the incredible woman we always knew you could be. And now, 3 years later, I hope you have proven us right. I hope you have built a life you are proud of. I hope you have discovered just how strong and capable you truly are. But here is the part you don't know yet. We didn't leave you with nothing. In fact, we left you with something far more valuable than money or property. We left you with a lesson, a test, and a gift. The lesson is this: your worth is not determined by what others give you. It is determined by what you build for yourself. The test was to see if you could survive the heartbreak and still become the person you were meant to be. And the gift, my darling Emma, is waiting for you. There is a safety deposit box at First National Bank under your name. Inside, you will find a key and instructions. Your grandfather and I set up a trust for you, separate from the will. It has been growing for years, and it is now yours. But more than the money, there are letters. Letters we wrote to you over the years, filled with all the things we wanted to say but never could. We wanted you to have them when you were ready. When you had grown into the woman we always believed you could be. I know this doesn't erase the pain. I know it doesn't make the last 3 years easier, but I hope it helps you understand that we never stopped loving you. We never stopped believing in you. You were always our brightest star. With all my love, always and forever, Grandma Rose. I read the letter 3 times. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of release, of understanding, of something I couldn't quite name. Mr. Whitman handed me a tissue and waited patiently. When I finally looked up, he said, "There's more. The trust she mentioned is substantial. Your grandparents were very careful with their investments. It's been managed well." I could barely speak. I whispered, "Why didn't they just tell me?" he said gently, because some lessons can only be learned through experience. They wanted you to discover your own strength before you had the safety net. They believed in you that much. I left his office in a daze. I drove straight to the bank. At the bank, I was taken to a private room where they brought out the safety deposit box. My hands were still shaking as I opened it. Inside was a key, a stack of envelopes, and a folder with financial documents. I opened the folder first. The numbers didn't make sense at first, but as I read through the documents, I realized what I was looking at. My grandparents had set up a trust fund for me when I was born. They had been adding to it for years, investing carefully, letting it grow. And now it was worth more than I ever could have imagined. Enough to pay off my student loans, enough to buy a house, enough to start a business if I wanted to, enough to give me choices, freedom, security. But as overwhelming as that was, it wasn't what mattered most. What mattered were the letters. There were dozens of them, each one dated, each one sealed. I opened the first one. It was from Grandpa Henry, written when I was 5 years old. He wrote about the day I helped him plant tomatoes in the garden, how I insisted on doing it myself even though I kept dropping the seeds. He wrote about how proud he was of my determination, my independence. I opened another. This one was from Grandma Rose, written when I was 13. She wrote about a conversation we had on the porch swing where I told her I wanted to help people someday. She wrote, "You have such a kind heart, Emma. Never lose that. The world needs more people like you." There were letters for every milestone, every birthday, every moment they thought was important. Letters about my first day of high school, my graduation, the day I got my driver's license. They had been documenting my life, celebrating me, even when I didn't know it. I sat on the floor of that bank room and read every single letter. Some made me laugh, some made me cry. All of them made me feel loved in a way I hadn't felt in 3 years. When I finally finished, I sat there in silence, holding the letters against my chest. I understood now. They hadn't abandoned me. They had believed in me so much that they were willing to let me feel abandoned just so I could discover my own strength. It was a painful gift, but it was a gift nonetheless. I left the bank and drove to the cemetery where they were buried. I hadn't been there since the funerals. I couldn't bring myself to go. But now, I needed to. I stood in front of their graves, holding the letters. I said, "I understand now. I don't know if I agree with what you did. I don't know if I would have made the same choice. But I understand, and I forgive you, and I love you, I always have." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees. For a moment, it felt like they were there with me. That evening, I called my mother and told her everything. She cried. She said she had no idea about the trust or the letters. She said, "Your grandparents were complicated people, but they loved you, Emma, they really did." I also thought about Daniel. I realized now that he had been given a burden too. He had been left with the responsibility of managing the estate, of dealing with the family, of carrying the guilt. Neither of us had been given the easy path. We had both been tested in different ways. I reached out to him a few days later. We met for coffee. It was awkward at first. But then I told him about the letter about the trust. He listened quietly. When I finished, he said, "I'm glad. I always felt like something was missing, like there was a piece of the story I didn't understand." I asked him how he was doing. He admitted that taking care of the house, dealing with everything, it had been harder than he expected. He said, "I thought the inheritance was a gift, but sometimes it felt more like a weight." We talked for hours. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe again. In the months that followed, I made some important decisions. I used part of the trust to pay off my student loans. The relief I felt was indescribable. For the first time in years, I wasn't drowning in debt. I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. I could breathe. I also used some of the money to go back to school. I enrolled in a master's program for social work. It was something I had always wanted to do but could never afford. I wanted to help people the way my grandparents had helped me, by believing in them even when they didn't believe in themselves. I kept working at the marketing firm part-time while I studied. It was exhausting, but it was also fulfilling. I felt like I had a purpose again. I bought a small house, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I painted the walls, planted a garden, and even put up a porch swing. Every time I sat on it, I thought of my grandparents and smiled. I framed one of Grandma's letters and hung it in my living room. It was the one she wrote when I was 16, where she said, "You are stronger than you think." I read it every morning as a reminder. I also reconnected with my family. I started going to gatherings again. It was uncomfortable at first, but it got easier. People asked me how I was doing, and I could finally answer honestly. I was doing well. I was healing. I stayed in touch with Daniel. We weren't close, but we were friendly. He eventually sold the house and used the money to start his own law practice. He seemed happier, lighter. I think letting go of the house helped him too. One day, about a year after I received the letter, I was volunteering at a community center, helping people with job applications and resumes. An older woman came in, looking lost and overwhelmed. I sat with her, helped her fill out forms, listened to her story. When we finished, she took my hand and said, "Thank you. You made me feel like I mattered." In that moment, I understood what my grandparents had been trying to teach me. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the house or the inheritance. It was about this. It was about showing up for people. It was about using whatever you have, time, kindness, patience, to make someone else's life a little bit better. I thought about the 3 years I spent feeling abandoned, feeling worthless, and I realized that those years, as painful as they were, had shaped me. They had forced me to discover my own strength, my own resilience. They had taught me that my worth wasn't tied to what I was given, but to what I could give. I still missed my grandparents every single day. I missed their voices, their laughter, their wisdom, but I no longer felt abandoned by them. I felt held by them, even in their absence. I graduated with my master's degree 2 years later. At the ceremony, I carried a photo of Grandma Rose and Grandpa Henry. I wanted them to be there in some way. After graduation, I got a job at a nonprofit organization that helped low-income families access resources and support. It wasn't a glamorous job. The pay wasn't great, but it was exactly where I was supposed to be. I met people who were struggling, who felt invisible, who didn't think they mattered. And I got to tell them, "You do matter. You are stronger than you think. And you are not alone." Those were the words my grandparents had given me. And now I was passing them on. I also started a small scholarship fund in my grandparents' names. It wasn't much, but it helped a few students each year pay for college. I wanted their legacy to be about lifting people up, about believing in potential even when others couldn't see it. On the 5th anniversary of Grandma Rose's passing, I went back to the cemetery. I brought flowers and one of the letters I had written to her but never sent. In it, I thanked her for the painful gift she had given me. I thanked her for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. I told her that I had become the woman she hoped I would be. And I told her that I finally understood what love really meant. Love isn't always soft. Sometimes it's tough. Sometimes it means letting someone struggle so they can discover their own strength. Sometimes it means making painful choices because you believe in someone's future more than their present comfort. As I walked away from the cemetery, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I had been disinherited, yes, but I had also been given something far more valuable. I had been given a chance to prove to myself that I was enough, that I could build a life worth living, not because of what I was handed, but because of who I chose to become. And that, I realized, was the greatest inheritance of all. Today, when people ask me about my grandparents, I don't tell them about the will or the painful 3 years. I tell them about the letters. I tell them about the love that was hidden beneath the hurt. I tell them about the lesson that changed my life. I tell them that sometimes, the people who love you most will let you fall, not because they don't care, but because they know you have the strength to rise. And rising, I have learned, is where you discover who you truly are. I am Emma. I was disinherited by the people I loved most. But in that disinheritance, I found myself. I found my strength. I found my purpose. And I found a love that transcended money, property, and material things. A love that believed in me before I believed in myself. And that is a gift I will carry with me for the rest of my life.